about 3 years ago, a friend of his, who's the editor of, photo editor of a newspaper, and he fishes with, came up with this idea that I was going to do a couple of stories, like 5 different stories for the newspaper, so I'd have something to do in Iceland. And so one of the stories that I said I wanted to do was something on their disabled children, because they have an incredible program there for disabled children. It's free. And so it was really hard to have access. I kept saying no, no, no. And finally they allowed me one day. So I went for one day and I took pictures. And it was interesting, but it was one day, you know. But there was this one little kid that was really interesting to me, that he was walked with difficulty on a walker, and he had no language, couldn't speak at all. And he was very brave. We went swimming with the kids, and he was, you know, very brave and full of life, and he kept looking at me to see that I was taking his picture. So at the end of the day, I went to visit a friend of mine who's a designer. I was just introduced to her, and she had a showroom. She's a clothing designer. Her name is Stainen, and I said, she said, what are you doing here? And I told her that I had been to this school. And she said, well, what did you think about it? I said, well, it was really amazing, but I only had one day. I said, well, there was this one kid I really loved. He was really adorable. And she said, what was his name? And I said, Alexander. And she said, that's my son. So it was like meant to be. So when the piece came out, like the head of, it was on, Alexander, of course, was on the cover of the newspaper, his little star. And she arranged for the museum, the National Museum of Iceland, to do a project on the schools and daycare there. And for me to take photographs and for Martin to go and make a film. So the following year we went back and I made photographs in these schools, and Martin made a film. I want you to see the film. I'm going to go really fast through my photographs because I think the film is really extraordinary. So I wanted to give it a positive name, so I called it Extraordinary Child. And how do I forward this?
Push down.
On which one? On this? Oh, okay. On this one? Okay, so that's Alexander. His mother's a designer. So. And it's just basically I spent like 1 month, and then I made 2 more trips back. So I had different seasons, and took pictures. And that's Alexander. And it was a really difficult situation because, you know, I had to treat it with the utmost of respect, of course, but I also had to show that being disabled is horrible. And I gave nicknames to the kids because they were impossible. The Icelandic's really complicated language. Like I called him Sparrow. This little girl had this really rare syndrome. She's from the Faroe Islands, and there's a syndrome in the Faroe Islands that, I mean, she may not even still be alive. This was 2 years ago, but where slowly you lose all muscular control and you die. And I called her Sleeping Beauty. And it was really great because they had a big opening when, you know, at the museum, and they had a special opening for the kids and their families, and they came like the day before the other opening, and it was like, you know, no one had ever recognized these kids before. They were kids that had been ignored and hidden away, and I think the families were so excited to have their kids be part of something. So now let me show you the film. How do I,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.